So this is a question we ask all our guests on the show, actually. Where do you think HR will be in 2025?
I think it's going to look very different. I mean, yeah, I think you're going to see, I think we've seen flashes of brilliance among certain HR teams or certain companies that do HR really, really well. Google is always a great example of one, although, you know, they've done some things right and some things they haven't gotten right. But I think it's shifting away from a kind of follow the rules compliance, and this has been happening, right? To much more of really focused on the employee, right? That shift is occurring, and so, you know, an example of that, I refer to Silicon Valley. I grew up in Silicon Valley. I don't live there now, but I go back quite frequently, and you don't see traditional HR departments anymore. What they care about is culture. What they care about is initiatives that are important to them, diversity and inclusion. That's one that we keep talking about, but certainly, you know, companies that are when I say focus, they're actually measuring it, monitoring it, putting plans in place to improve it. And so those are more kind of core strategic initiatives that they're focused on that maybe they weren't 5 and 10 years ago. Maybe they had diversity inclusion programs, but they, you know, it was more, you know, kind of not something that they were necessarily looking at the data and measuring the data and managing the outcomes of that data. So I think that's where the shift's going to be over the next 5 to 7 years, is much more focused on the employee, much more focused on things that are important to them, and making sure that there's flexibility into that, because it's changing, right? The thing that most employees haven't necessarily figured out yet is how do they build this loyalty of employee, because it's going the opposite direction. And yes, the economy has some part to do with that, but I think it's building that loyalty and culture is really where you see the sustaining companies.
And I think, as we said throughout, if companies use the technology correctly, then they can actually try and imbue some of that loyalty by personalising some of this technology for, you know, what employees, what the workforce wants.
Yeah. And when I say employee, you know, you've said this a couple times, which is personalizing that experience is so important, because you know, the fear that a lot of companies have, a lot of tech companies have in particular, are burnout. Employees are just burning out more faster than they ever have, and it's not because they necessarily hate the company or they hate the job. They've been running fast for a period of time. Like, how can you recognize that? We certainly have technology that probably can start to diagnose and recognize things like burnout, you know, other things that employees are dealing with that are important, that we should be focused on.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice, and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.